the president chooses this option, it would unleash at least 2,300 weapons. Immediately, it would just flatten Russia. It would be a radiating ruin for centuries. That's MAO4. That's a Cold War option that we keep in the nuclear football suitcase at the disposal of the president. And that's what drives our current nuclear operation.
The Democratic caucus had a briefing by Bruce Blair. He came in and made a presentation to us. It was a terrific briefing, but it didn't give us the kind of detail and targeting that we wanted.
Kerry, along with other senators, now decided that they had a responsibility to find out what was in the briefcase. Defense Undersecretary Walter Slocum gave them a briefing. But when they asked for detailed information, Slocum refused.
Some of them may have been unhappy. There is an established procedure by which we have briefed the relevant committees and leaders in the Congress on these issues.
The Pentagon's reluctance to discuss the war plan goes back to the Cold War, when Congress only allowed a handful of senators access to nuclear secrets.
Those are procedures which are established by the Congress every bit as much as by the executive branch, and we will abide by whatever process the Congress chooses to establish. What we were not prepared to do was sort of on the spot to change those long-standing procedures.
But Kerry, along with other senators, is now pushing for greater access to the war plan.
Show me the detonations. Show me where you're going to put the detonations that you've decided are necessary inside of Russia in order to deter the Russians.
What we're looking at is the targeting against Russian nuclear forces.
To find out what's in the war plan, you might not need the Pentagon. That, at least, is what this nuclear physicist, Matthew McKenzie, and his bosses at the National Resources Defense Council say.
We can piece together, we believe, a very reasonable picture of what the war plan looks like.
Drawing on declassified information, from old NATO targeting studies to census data, they've come up with an elaborate theory of how Stratcom puts its nuclear war plan together.
And we have 11 nuclear explosions, in the inner region of Moscow, would produce 9.6 million fatalities.
McKenzie's motivation is quite simple. Let people know what's in the war plan, and they won't tolerate it.
When you're trying to evaluate some of the options that are in the president's nuclear suitcase, what kinds of deaths are we talking about?
With only on the order of 200 nuclear weapons targeted against Russian cities, it's possible to kill over 50 million Russians.
That's if the...
That's 200 warheads, about 2.5% of our current arsenal.
We've been talking about America's nuclear war plan, but there's a Russian nuclear war plan as well. Portrayed here is McKenzie's theory of that plan. The launch orders would come from here, headquarters of Russia's strategic rocket forces, in this secret city just on the edge of Moscow. It's a strangely charming setting for a place built to destroy America. But even the children here know the legend of the great gun their parents keep under the ground.
Well, it is a very big gun, and it can break a world.
It can break the world.
Yes.
I sat outside your headquarters here talking to some young boys, and they said that they knew that underneath there was a great gun, that if it was ever used, it would end the world.
Они в чем-то правы.
They are right to a certain extent.
Они и очень близки к истине, да.
They're very close to the truth, by the way.
That is Russia's nuclear commander, General Vladimir Yakovlev. The nightmare scenario in Washington was that one day a man in General Yakovlev's position would walk down these halls with orders to launch an attack. And on this day, Russia's nuclear commander agreed to take us down with him. We were on our way to the place where the red button is kept, in this room known simply as the Central Command Post. The clocks on the wall say it all. Washington, D.C., Moscow, as if frozen in time from the Cold War.
Look here, isn't this the heart of the problem? We have become friends, and yet they still have these war plans intact, being rehearsed all the time, that would call for annihilating each other.
Я думаю, этот вопрос надо задавать
I think this
военным.
question should be asked not of
Этот
military
вопрос надо
people.
больше задавать политикам.
It should be asked of politicians more than us.
Ну, задайте этот вопрос политикам.
Ask this question of
Мы выполняем
politicians.
приказы.
But Yakovlev is not alone. It turns out that at least some of his American counterparts have been thinking the same way for some time now. One of them is General Chuck Horner, America's former early warning commander.
The Commander's Strategic Command and I would frequently sit down and talk about the absurdity of having these large numbers of nuclear weapons.
Well, how would those conversations go?
Well, where are we headed? What are we doing? Is the Cold War over? If it's over, why do we have these forces still opposing each other in the field?
It's just a small spot from up here, but for decades, it had come to symbolize one of America's greatest fears. On a map, it's 55 degrees north, 37 degrees east. On the U.S. nuclear war plan, it's always been ground zero. This is the city that haunted America for decades. The Kremlin, Red Square, Moscow. It's the heart of what Ronald Reagan called the evil empire. But when you come here today, what you find is a city of churches and rampant capitalism. There are thousands of young Americans who live here. And a mayor who wants even more to come.
I'm very like American people, American business. I am very like to live in friendship.
And surprisingly, the city even opened itself up 2 years ago to this American, retired four-star General Lee Butler. Until 1994, he had been America's nuclear commander, responsible for the war plan that targeted Moscow.
It must be completely surreal for you on some levels, then, to be moving about in this city like a normal civilian, not thinking about destroying this city, but...
It goes beyond surreal. As we ride in this van, Moscow is still the target of enormous range of U.S. nuclear weapons. All of it on alert.
And that fact that thousands of American and Russian nuclear warheads are still on combat alert years after the Cold War had ended turned Butler into a man with a mission.
From the perspective of this one former Cold Warrior who has chosen to continue to embroil himself in these issues, the message is very clear. It's time to close the nuclear era.
But closing down the nuclear era is no small task. You understand that when you discover just how much of the old Soviet nuclear arsenal is still intact. This Typhoon-class submarine is a good place to begin. 2 football fields long, 8 stories high. It sails with up to 200 warheads. It's just one of a host of apocalyptic weapon systems spread out across Russia's 11 time zones in bases and facilities that appear on no map. Take a look at this rail-based missile train with its 30 warheads. And here, down deep under the missile base at Tatishevo, Russian missileers rehearsing the launch of a weapon they call Satan. The most destructive weapon ever made